You know that feeling when like a movie or TV show gets like really hyped up before you get to see it? You know what I'm talking about? How do you approach a movie? Like, do you watch it and think it can't live up to the expectations, or do you have a part of you that's like, I kind of don't want to watch it now? Can you relate to that feeling at all?
Yes.
I don't. I
Like
can't even explain because even like it'll be people like I know and trust, and they know my taste, and they're like, "Dude, trust me, you got to see it." And one person making a recommendation is stronger than like every single person I know and talk to says this is the greatest thing ever, and I'm just like, it can't. I don't know I don't know why, but it makes me not want to watch it.
Yeah, no, I get that completely. It's why I haven't watched The Brutalist.
Man,
Also, it's like 3.5 hours. That's
it's super. It has an intermission, I believe. I actually heard who did I hear? Bill Burr on his podcast talking about it. He said there's an actual intermission in the movie, which I'm for. I'm pro. But
Sure,
yeah, that's a long movie. I do really like Adrian Brody, and it sounds like his career kind of went off the rails for a bit. It sounds like he's maybe getting his flowers again, which is great. But it also, I hear, is like a tough watch, and I'm just in the year of our Lord 2025. I don't know if I want to sit down for a 3-hour movie like that, but I'll get around to it. A big one for me though was the show Ted Lasso. I just had no interest in watching that. Every single person I know said it was great. No way it's that good. Plus, for a long time, I didn't have Apple TV. Like, I've had it off and on if I get a free, trial with whatever Apple product I buy or whatever. But I don't know. I switched to T-Mobile sometime last year. It comes with Apple TV for free. And so I've had it for a while now. And I finally checked out Ted Lasso. Again, the year 2025. The show's 8 years old now. When it came out 2017, something like that.
God, no way is it that old.
No, it's 2020. 2020, I think, is when it started. 2019, 2020. Okay. Sorry about that. Sorry to scare you like that.
Woof.
Regardless, it's been 5 years of people, praising it, which, most of that was the pandemic. So it feels like 10 years of people talking about Ted Lasso. And I watched it, and unfortunately, Andrew, it's one of the best TV shows I've ever seen. Unfortunately,
no.
I'm now one of those people that's like, hey, have you watched it? You haven't watched Ted Lasso? Oh, you would love it. You gotta watch this. It's so good. I have not finished it yet. We just started season 3. I got like halfway through season 2, and then I stopped watching it, and I talked to a friend of the show, my wife, and I was like, look, I know you're like me with Ted Lasso, but like I started watching it. You're gonna love it. And I started it over. We watched it together. And just started the final season and hooked.
It's very good. The Christmas episode in particular is now one of my like annual, like I watch it every year now.
1000%.
Very heavily. I'll be interested to see what you think about season 3. There was the response to it feels like it was a little bit more mixed than the first 2, which were kind of like universally positive. So I liked it, to be clear. I liked it. So
I think I'm like 2 episodes in, and I'm gonna keep this spoiler free because I'm sure there's people out there who were like me and haven't watched it. But what I love about the show, speaking of broad terms, is that it doesn't rely on conflict in the way most shows do. There's very little of that, actually. I would say the driving force is characters taking accountability and trying to be better people. That's it. That's what's propelling the show. And that's incredibly refreshing. And it's so well done. And I feel like there's this extra layer for me to sink my teeth into, because I believe we talked about this on the podcast before. Jason Sudeikis, very unlikable to me. I don't mean the person. I mean like the characters I see him play. He's pretty antagonistic on The Last Man on Earth, one of my favorite TV shows, Will Forte. Colossal, though, is the big one. I know we talked about that. He's such an ass And that's an understatement. He's a horrible person there. But even
It
something like
it is a tremendously great performance that genuinely almost made me hate the man
yes,
for good.
yeah,
Like, it's so good, and I just genuinely was like, I almost like see, and even anyway, yeah. The long short, yeah. When I saw he was Ted Lasso, and everyone saw, I was like, oh, that guy. I was like,
yeah.
come on. Even in
He,
like We're the Millers, he's like a
sleazy
tool.
and scummy.
Like, he's
Yeah,
just
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, even when he's the lead or or comedic. I love the movie Masterminds. Really flew under the radar in my opinion, but he's a tool. That's a great way to put it, a tool in that as well. So that's just the energy he brings and how I always see him. And so starting Ted Lasso, he's like super optimistic, super positive, tons of corny dad jokes kind of guy. And on top of that, he has this like Kansas accent. And I'm just like, I'm not buying this act, I am like all the other characters in the show. We're like, is this guy for real? Like waiting for the other shoe to drop, and he just wears you down. And eventually you're like, no, this is genuine. This is who this person is. And once like you come around to that, it's just it's just it's a good show. I'll keep you posted. I suspect next week or so we'll probably wrap this final season up and I'll circle back around to this. But it turns out, Andrew, one of the most praised television shows of the past 10 years is in fact very good. Breaking news here.
Turns out sometimes it's right. I No, I like it a lot. Even if you watch like the original like Ted Lasso skits that were like done as a joke way
promo
back
spots.
When, yeah, like back before it was a show. Like even in those, the character has like a more cynical edge, like a much more in line with kind of how I think you would envision kind of Sudeikis playing a character like that. Whereas when they get to the show, something about it is like, you know what? Let's just make this the most wholesome man in the history of existence.
I did read a quote from Sudeikis that he talked about that specifically, how they wanted to intentionally turn up like the, lack of a better word, positivity for the TV show. And he was saying, just kind of looking at the landscape of the culture, he said everything was very cynical, and it seemed he didn't want to put that out into the world, more of that. He wanted to inject some positivity, and it honestly sounds exactly like what we're trying to do here with our hashtag positivity podcast. Our whole mission statement when we launched this thing was like, you know what, there's enough podcasts out there trashing movies, bad movie podcasts or whatever. What if we just try the opposite approach, just to put that more of what we want to see into the world, be the change you want to be, if you will. And so I definitely resonated with that quote from him, that mission statement. Thought that was pretty cool.
I'm gonna choke. Yeah, and the truth is I think that's why it kind of gained so much traction, especially during like the pandemic, because in a time like that where cynicism and the kind of darkness was becoming more than a lot could handle, having something that was like, you know what, we're going to be positive, we're going to be optimistic, we're going to be wholesome, we're going to create this thing that is going to specifically not be that. I think it became like a calling card for a lot of people to be like, oh, this is the thing, this is it. I had similar feelings when like I watched Bill and Ted 3 for the first time, because that was during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And that was another moment of like, oh, here are just two characters that are very, very wholesome. They're not negative characters. They are a little beaten down and weary in this movie, but they're just trying to save the world and make it better. And, the way I put it is that I will always love things that are about the triumph of humanity, and that things that are about, in effect, humans succeeding at, I don't know what the best word is, but just when it's us overcoming an obstacle together and that sort of thing. And on a scale like Ted Lasso, where it's just this group, and you see the impact he has on the group, and you see ultimately how like even the people that are skeptical of him as a coach ultimately come around. It works, and it hits, and it lands, and for me, that's the kind of stuff I want to see in this day and age. I can rewatch Ted Lasso anytime, even when it makes me feel things and I don't like it. Because nobody makes me feel my own feelings. Nobody. But
Andrew, we have a movie to get to, and we're gonna do that. But first, who's your favorite character in Ted Lasso?
Coach Beard, maybe? I don't know. I something about a redhead with a beard. I guess it stands out to me.
Beard is fantastic. I love him in small doses. I personally, the episode all about Coach Beard is my least favorite so far. I feel like that's one you've got to sit with, and maybe it'll grow on you. But I do love the character. For me, though, he's here, he's there, he's everywhere. Roy Kent. All right, theme song.
We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts, we have the best of the rest.
Hello and welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my 40-foot co-host, Andrew Williams. Say something to the listeners, Andrew.
Something to the listeners.
Each week, we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Big Animal Month! And this week, we are talking the 1997 film Anaconda. Andrew, what's your history with this movie?
I have seen it before.
In 1997?
Maybe not 1997, but I definitely saw it like not long after it came out. Probably when it hit like the television circuit.
Sure.
I definitely don't think I saw it in theaters. I don't remember. Is this rated R? I don't remember. But
it's gotta be, right? I just kind of assume it is.
There's a lot of swearing. There's a lot of computer-generated snake violence.
Kids can't see that.
Kids can't be watching this. They can't watch John Voight get digested and then spit back out and somehow still wink. That'd be weird. But anyway, yeah. So I have not revisited it in some time. As with most things that we talk about.
It is PG-13, by the way.
Most things. PG-13. So this was 97. So I was only 10, and I was 9, actually. I was about to turn 10. And there's no way that my parents would take me to see a PG-13 movie before I was 13.
Sure.
That's not a possibility. Anyway, have not revisited it in some time. Obviously, there are scenes in this movie that have lived in my head rent-free forever. There are definitely, like, rewatching this, there's definitely moments where I like things, you have like the flashbacks where you're just like, oh, I do remember watching this. Oh, yeah. I do remember this movie. I do remember all of these scenes, and there's a lot of that in this movie. So it's definitely a movie that's in my brain more than I probably realized, but I had definitely not gone back to in a while.
Two scenes really stuck out. Like, if you try to have me list as many scenes of this movie in detail as I could before rewatching it, I would have came up with two very specific scenes. But that's it. I saw it once or twice back in the day. I don't think in theaters, probably on home video. I liked it well enough, and it was just that snake movie I saw once upon a time after that. And it has a bit of a following. I guess we'll get to that. Let's set the stage here. The movie is released April 11th of 1997 and made on a budget of $45 million. At the box office, it brings in $136.8 million. Decent sized little summer hit there in 1997. Critically, it's not well received. Holds just a 41% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. The audience score, I don't know what it is about this month, Andrew. The audience score is a 24%. It's
That's
lower
nuts.
than the critics. And what I was about to get into is this movie is generally regarded as a cult classic. Or a recent, God, I guess 97 was a long time ago. It's a cult classic, which is funny to me because it was, like I just said, a hit at the time, but it definitely has a following and has kind of been reclaimed by a lot of fans. It's got a bunch of sequels. It's a whole franchise now. It's getting rebooted, apparently. Maybe we talk about that later. But still, I guess those people that clamor for this movie aren't logging into Rotten Tomatoes to leave their positive thoughts.
No, absolutely not, which kind of surprised me. I figured that there was going to be some, like, you know, you were going to at least see it in like the 50s or the 60s. This
Sure.
is kind of like almost all of these movies. I think I've been kind of surprised by the audience score.
Yeah.
I kind of expected them to be higher because I felt like a lot more of these movies had cult followings, rather. Feels like Deep Blue Sea. Even Deep Blue Sea, I think I was a little surprised by how low it was.
Yeah.
They all kind of just not. I thought they were more. I guess I thought the cult followings were bigger than they are.
Yeah. I guess that's what makes them a cult.
But it turns out big animals don't always hit for everybody.
Few writing credits here. It's written by Hans Bauer, who this is early in his career, but he does also at least write the story for Titan AE, a movie I don't think I ever saw, but I remember the marketing so clearly. Maybe it'll be a future episode of this podcast.
It sounds like it should be.
We also have the writing duo of Jim Cash and Jack Epps Jr. They had a few hits under their belt before this, like Top Gun. Ever heard of it? Turner and Hooch. And they're alums of the show because they're also writers on Dick Tracy. I do want to say Jim did pass away in 2000, so R.I.P. Jim Cash.
Not long after this. That is, died after hospitalization for an intestinal ailment. That is unfortunate. I do see on Hans Bauer's writing credit that he was the writer on a movie called Komodo, which I presume means it's a movie about Komodo dragons. And I
Sounds
actually
awesome.
love the poster for this movie because it says, "From the writer of Anaconda and the special effects creator of Jurassic Park, welcome to the bottom of the food chain," which is just a genuinely great subtitle, like motto for this movie. And I don't know how I've never heard of it. I'm guessing because it's not great. But,
Andrew, the movie is called Komodo, and you don't know how you've never heard of it.
yeah.
What about the sequel?
It's,
KVC Komodo versus Cobra.
Apparently, it's
ultimate
not
battle.
a sequel. It's just shares a name. But anyway, I need to go
that's
watch
too
some
bad.
Komodo dragon movies, apparently, is what I'm guessing here. But anyway, I just love that you would hype up your movie as being from the writer of Anaconda and like using that as your selling point. I guess it made money, so. But yeah, an interesting group. I wouldn't be shocked if this was a situation where Jim Cash and Jack Epps wrote a script years and years and years ago, and then Hans Bauer kind of got brought in closer to production to kind of punch it up, modernize it, whatever. And we're in a situation kind of like that. But yeah.
And then the movie is directed by Luis Llosa. Previously had directed Sniper, a decent hit in the early 90s, as well as a movie called The Specialist, starring Sylvester Stallone and Sharon Stone. A movie that I've never heard of, Andrew. I feel like every week of my life, I find a new Sylvester Stallone movie that I've never seen or sometimes never heard of. I texted you the other day because I bought Assassins with him and
Antonio Banderas.
and Tony. Yeah, and I was like, how have I not seen it? It didn't even seem familiar. And you know, it's on record how much I love Sylvester Stallone and many of his movies, even the ones other people consider bad. But there's just so many I have yet to actually sit down and watch. So I gotta add another one to my list, Andrew. Stallone and Stone together at last.
Their couple name could just be Stallone.
Stole Stone? Why am I making it worse? You had it the first time. Stallone. Yeah.
It's Stallone is right there. It contains both of their names already without needing to do anything. Um, yeah, it definitely, looking at his filmography, the earlier movies, you've got Hour of the Assassin starring Eric Estrada. Uh, and you've got this movie Crime Zone starring David Carradine. So we're certainly playing in a particular type of film there. That is direct to video, I'm guessing. But then Sniper, like you said, starring Tom Berenger, that becomes a modest hit. Sniper spawned a whole series of sequels that, like, they literally are, like, making them still. Like, it's actually, like, genuinely wild. They actually just released one called Sniper The Last Stand that I think comes out this year. It's like, they're making, like, one every year now. It's absolutely insane. There's just nobody needs this many Sniper movies. Tom Berenger actually even showed up for a few of them, just because obviously Tom Berenger is not the most high profile thing Tom Berenger's probably done recently was Inception, maybe. But hey, get that bag, man. Do your thing. But Billy Zane is in the original Sniper, and he's a pretty cool dude. Then The Specialist, The Specialist is one where, like, I know it exists, but I couldn't have told you anything about it. And then obviously Anaconda, and then not a lot on his filmography after Anaconda, just a few movies here. So I don't know if this is just a thing where it's not been updated, and there's a lot more like Peruvian projects that he's been working on. But yeah, does Anaconda, despite being a decent hit, doesn't really follow it up with anything. So a little surprising there.
Andrew, after Sylvester Stallone and Sharon Stone separate, would Sylvester then be all Stallone?
Folks,
I want everyone to know that you did smile. You can try to hide it all you want.
I just want you to know that I've considered hosting this podcast to be a great pleasure. I've had a lot of fun.
The hatred you feel is for yourself for actually finding that funny.
The following that we've built. I just want you to know that I appreciate every single one of you.
All Stallone,
there are
Andrew.
days
All Stallone.
where your support has just made all the difference to me. And despite the fact that the show is now ending, I just want you to know that it's appreciated, that you have helped us create something beautiful that will hopefully stand the test of time.
Okay, and we're going to talk about a snake movie now. Here we go.
I just want to bid you all farewell.
Give me the transition music. Come on. A documentary film crew is making their way through the Amazon to shoot a film about an indigenous tribe when they come across a stranded snake hunter named Paul. He joins the crew and offers to help find the subject of their documentary, but it soon becomes clear that his true intention is to capture a record-breaking 20-foot anaconda. As tensions rise, the crew realizes they not only need to fear the giant snakes in the Amazon, but Paul as well. Andrew, I remembered that this movie was about a bunch of people on a boat and a giant snake trying to kill him. I remember John Voight's character being the bad guy. Did not remember they were a film crew shooting a documentary. There's this tribe that they're trying to find, which I thought would factor in much more to the movie than it ended up doing. Didn't remember any of that, Andrew.
I feel like if you had pressed me, I would have remembered, because I felt like I remembered at the end when you like see the tribe. And I feel like I remembered that Ice Cube was a cameraman. So there were like fragments of it where, like, if you asked me what they were doing, I probably would have like dug deep into the recesses of my brain and come up with something akin to this. But yeah, it's definitely weird how this movie begins and then versus how it ends.
Welcome back to the podcast, by the way, after that hiatus. You quit the show like 2 minutes ago, saying welcome back.
Folks, I'm gonna quit again at this rate.
Andrew, before you leave us, are we gonna talk all about this movie, all the positives, everything we like about it? But we're gonna start with the cast, specifically with the high point, the best casting, best performance in the movie, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the Call of Duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Anaconda?
Some interesting performances here, and some performances that I actually kind of forgot about, if I'm being honest. But there's a couple of people that make it all the way to the end of this movie. Not many. The crew does get pared down quite heavily to a more digestible amount, if you will. But it is no, take that. Don't no.
It's staying in.
Awful, terrible. Anyway, couple of options there, but I am going to be going with Ice Cube as our resident cameraman, Danny Rich, as my Mark Strong. He is one of our survivors throughout the length of this movie. And if you've always wondered why there's not a character in these movies who basically spends the whole time going, why? What is happening? This is dumb. I hate all of this. That's basically Ice Cube in this movie. He basically, like, as the movie twists and turns, he's the guy that's just like, no, come on. Like, he hates
Very
it,
early
but,
on, he's like, I'll kill this guy. You want me to knife him? Like, he really, he catches up.
As he's listening to the song he wrote. Which is also part of why I know why I've, like, picked it, because there's a point in this movie where he is literally listening to a song that he wrote. But it is a fun performance. One of the first, I think, that he kind of did outside of no, this is a decent way, and this is like after Friday. This is after.
It's after Friday, which is his big moment. But yeah, his first movie's Boys in the Hood, which off and running. Does some small parts, but yeah, I think Friday is what makes him sort of have a. I hate to use the word legit, like it wasn't legit before, but it kind of shows everybody that he's serious about being a filmmaker.
It's the breakout, if you will. It's the kind of breakout performance, or like I guess the one that's like the big hit, makes some waves, pretty successful, and then he does Anaconda, which is the natural progression from doing like a buddy comedy film set at one guy's house. Then you do a movie about giant snake. Yeah, and then he would go. I mean, alum of the show, Ice Cube as well. Ghosts of Mars.
Makes a few years after this. Also does Three Kings in 1999, which is a fantastic movie. I like Ice Cube in everything I've ever seen him in. I think he makes really smart choices. I mean, I haven't seen all his movies. I'm not gonna say they're all great, but I think he knows what he has to offer as far as being an actor. So whether it's lighthearted action or comedy or plays up like his angry persona, like in the 21, 22 Jump Street movies, he takes roles that I feel like are in his wheelhouse. He knows he can knock it out of the park. I always hesitate, feel like I'm doing some kind of backwards compliment here, but like, it's not like there's this huge dramatic role that was his Oscar play, because that's not the actor he is, and he knows that, like he again sticks to what, not only what he knows, but what he's genuinely very good at. This is so early in his filmography, but I never feel like I'm watching a rapper that happens to be in a movie or try to act. He just fits right into this role, and he's always just felt very, very natural. He clearly has a real passion for the movies.
And it's ironic, the year after this is actually, he writes, directs, and stars in a movie called The Players Club, that to date is the only film he's directed, and one of the only things the only non-documentary thing he's ever directed. So I just, so even the year after this, stepping into the director's chair, tried it once, decided it wasn't for him. Does do screenwriting here and there. Obviously, he was a writer on Friday. next Friday, Friday after next, all about the Benjamins, various things all over the place. But yeah, I just think he's doing a fun performance here. Just playing kind of almost the audience surrogate of just like how someone would react to everything that's happening in front of him. Obviously gets to get in on the action a little bit here, because they are fighting giant snakes. And, you know, I guarantee that, you know, if someone came to me right after I was breaking into film and said, hey, we're making a movie about a giant snake, do you want to be in it? I would probably say yes.
Andrew,
can't blame a man for doing that.
if I had a nickel for every movie that came out in the 90s about a giant killer animal that starred a rapper, and in the final climax, they get caught in the jaws of said animal, but are the only ones that manage to escape the grisly fate, I would have 2 nickels.
You would, which is not a lot, but it's weird it happened twice.
Woo! Crazy Mark Strong Award winner named Ice Cube. Well done. Andrew, I'm going a different direction. There's a performance that I'm pretty fascinated by. My Mark Strong Award is going to Jon Voight for his performance as Paul Cerrone. I gotta talk about the accent this guy has. The way he talks. I don't know if it's good as far as like that's how South Americans talk. I can't tell you the accuracy of it, but he's doing it very well, and it's very consistent. It's not like the accent comes and goes. When I first hear him talk, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, what? Because, you know, I've seen Jon Voight and other things. I know how he talks, and it's not like this. This is like, I'm getting like a Razor Ramon vibes. Like from the way he talks.
Almost, yeah.
The way he holds the corner of his mouth.
Why didn't you cast Scott Hall in this role, people?
That would have been awesome. He's got the corners of his mouth are always hanging down.
The Anaconda man, I would have loved that.
God, now I'm a little disappointed we didn't get that. But I like this, and he's just really going for it with that accent. He just seems like a real mean cuss, that's just the vibe that he gives. Like, you don't trust this guy. He seems like you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, and the movie knows that. A lot of the characters in the movie are immediately on edge when he's on board their boat, and they know he's up to no good. I think he plays this part really well. This is a performance that I certainly remembered over the years liking, especially the very last thing that he does on screen. We'll talk about that when we get to scenes, but that's one of the scenes that always stuck in my brain. It's great. Jon Voight kind of had this weird kind of renaissance in the 90s, also in Mission Impossible and Varsity Blues. So it's kind of the era that I know Jon Voight from, but he was already a legend of the screen before that. Things like Midnight Cowboy and Deliverance. It's unfortunate. I mean, I only want to talk about this guy's performance because in his personal life, I mean, he's said some wild stuff and things that I don't agree with. Let me put it that way. So, Jon Voight, the man, I don't know. I'm not here to celebrate that, but I really like this performance. I love his whole look, and again, that accent is it's tasty. I like it.
It is. Yeah, I mean, his career speaks for itself. Like you said, I'm in a similar boat. I don't have a whole lot else to say. A love of the show, obviously from... Wait, did we talk about the original Mission Impossible?
We did not talk about 2.
We talked about 2.
I mean, we've probably talked about the original Mission Impossible plenty of times because it's a great movie, but we have not covered it on the podcast.
Interesting. I don't know why I thought we had. But obviously taking over, inheriting the role of Jim Phelps there. I probably mentioned that Peter Graves wasn't the biggest fan of the villain turn for Jim Phelps there, but taking that on, I mean, small performances in movies like Heat, like I said, his career speaks for itself. This is a very interesting performance. He is no doubt our villain. Pretty much from the moment he appears, he's up to something. And by the end of the movie, pretty much everything bad that happens to our characters, he basically admits to purposely engineering. He wants to catch this 20-foot anaconda and realizes that this group is basically the bait. He actually needs to accomplish that. And when he gets challenged by one of them, he takes him out, makes sure that he's not a factor anymore so that he can take more command of everything. It is it is definitely a conniving performance. I mean, it doesn't quite have the depth of something like Larry Zoolander from Zoolander, but it's definitely pretty good.
Andrew, something most people probably remember about this movie is that it stars Jennifer Lopez. She was in this giant snake movie in the 90s. People remember that. And Andrew, I have a lot to say here. First off,
Oh no.
the picture of her on the cover, horrible picture. Like, what? It looks terrible. I don't know what they were doing. They pulled her from a random screenshot in the movie. I don't know. That's the first thing. Second thing is, and I texted you this. I'm like, man, she just looks like a totally different person than the image of Jennifer Lopez that I have in my brain. And I'm not even talking about like people have cosmetic surgeries or whatever. It's not what I'm getting at. I think it's mostly just age. Just as much earlier in her career, and when people go from like the early 20s to the 30s, they look different.
28, I think, when this comes out.
And here's the
9. So yeah.
Here's the last thing. Jennifer Lopez's career in my brain is so different than reality. Because here's what I thought. Oh yeah, she did Anaconda in the late 90s, but I was thinking, in the early 90s, she does Selena. That's her breakout. She makes a few kind of working man movies like this. And then in the 2000s, she really blows up with the rom-coms and stuff. Okay, that's all wrong. Selena is the same year. Selena comes out in 1997. I thought that was like 93, 94, because she looks, again, so much younger than that. So this is the same year as her big, again, breakout performance in Selena. She's also in Anaconda. Okay. 1998, the very next year, she does a voice in Ants alongside people like Sharon Stone and Sylvester Stallone and established big name actors. Because I remember her being in that movie and being like, oh, wow, Jennifer Lopez, she's a voice in Ants. In the year 2000, she's in The Cell, which, again, in my brain, I remember being like, oh, she's a massive movie star. This is subverting her image. But this is still so early in her career. Like, this is just post Selena as her one big performance. 2001, we get The Wedding Planner.
You just blew right past Out of Sight. You understand that, right?
Is it, am I making a big mistake by doing so, Andrew? That
yes,
movie doesn't register very much for me.
It's a Steven Soderbergh movie, adapted from the Elmore Leonard novel of the same name, but it stars George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez. This is George Clooney, like, right at, like, this is, it's post-Batman or it's right after Batman Around, but it's like George Clooney at, like, if there's a breakout movie role for George Clooney that, like, is the proto-Oceans movies, it's this. This movie is one of the sexiest movies ever made. It is so hot. But yeah, it is also, to be clear, great. It is genuinely great.
I will add it to my list.
Fantastic.
Looks like it didn't do too well at the box office, but I do see some critical reviews there. Okay, we're not going to go through every single movie in her filmography, but in 2001, she does Angel Eyes, which was like a huge flop. And again, in my brain, that was like years and years into her career, and then she finally has a misstep. But we're just 2001, 2002 enough, and then 2003, Andrew, 6 years after Selena, she makes Geely, a notorious bomb, near career-ending movie. That's only 6 years. In 2004 is Jersey Girls, like a 1-2 punch. And then she bounces back. She has some hits after that. But like that era of Jennifer Lopez is so much more compressed than I thought it was in my brain. And I guess a huge element is like she also had a thriving music career. So she was a bigger celebrity than just what I'm seeing here in her filmography. But again, if you were to ask me how many years were between Selena and Geely, I would have said at least 10. Certainly not 6.
It is an interesting career that has ebbs and flows, and there are definitely moments where it feels like she's trying to make a comeback. There's all sorts of interesting stuff here when you really dig into her, like, filmography. And it is... Well, and what's weird is I feel like, there's that movie like Made in Manhattan, which was the year before Geely, made like $150 million. And she's like the star of that, alongside my favorite actor, Rafe Fiennes. But it's also Stanley Tucci's in that too, Tucci Gang. But a little conclave 22 years beforehand. But like, so there's clearly like hits in her filmography where like she's succeeding. And then like Geely is this like it's considered so poor that like it is genuinely credited for not just stalling her career but also Ben Affleck. Like that movie basically takes them completely out of favor with almost everybody. Doesn't really affect anybody else in it so much. Like obviously, like people forget like Al Pacino is in Geely.
It also
Walken's in Geely. Like,
kills the career of its director Martin Brest, who had previously done, I mean, Beverly Hills Cop, Scent of a Woman. I mean, he was a big deal director. Has not directed a movie since Geely in 2003.
Has not. Then you would hope that everything he did to that point he doesn't have to. But either way, point being, like it's bad for everyone. If you were a bit, and obviously people like Al Pacino and Christopher Walken, like they're established notable names by that point. Their careers are going to continue no matter what because they're just bit parts. No one's going to point that to them. But yeah, it is an interesting career looking back at it. It is an interesting career. She's obviously still around, but she is, yeah, this is I don't really know how to put it into words, but
as far as the performance,
Jennifer Lopez here, it doesn't feel like you're watching the same Jennifer Lopez as other things, but
I was also surprised to see like the movie is not centered around her in any way. I mean, she on like the modern cover to this, they put her in the front probably because she's just the biggest name now at this point. But the original poster was just a picture of the snake because she wasn't really a huge deal at the time. And it's not like a star-making performance or a vehicle for her. She's one of the survivors. She's one of the leads of the movie, but there's not a big romantic subplot. There's not a lot of stuff to really center around her. She's kind of just another actor in the movie. It's not even to the level. It's not even like Sigourney Weaver and Alien, where you slowly realize it's not even that hard of a push. It's just, Jennifer Lopez happens to be in this movie,
Yeah.
Andrew Eric Stoltz is in this movie as
Marty
Dr.
McFly himself.
Stephen Cale, and I'm so glad you just said that, Andrew, because Eric Stoltz is very unique in this way. If you ask the average person what Eric Stoltz is known for, what performances he's known for, I think they come up with two things.
Pulp Fiction and what else?
No, I was going to say Mask and the original Marty McFly casting, which is a movie, obviously, okay. We've never seen him in the movie. It's just we all know that he was cast as Marty McFly, but being fired from that movie is one of the most notable things in his career. It's a bit like,
right.
Billy Zane, I think his cameo in Zoolander is among his top 3 performances or most well-known appearances. And it's a cameo about him being himself. But people know like Titanic, Phantom, and Zoolander. That's the big 3. And Eric Stoltz, again, I didn't think of Pulp Fiction. We can throw that in there. People, I don't think remember he's in Anaconda. People know Mask because that was a big deal. And then Marty McFly. He was almost in Back to the Future.
He was in Back to the Future, and then they replaced him. Which I guess is pedantically the same thing. But it's just it is interesting that I don't know that I can think of anybody else that's in a situation like that where like getting fired from a movie is arguably one of the most high profile things. It feels mean to say that because the man clearly has like a career that like continues and he's clearly successful, clearly has a lot of successes and a lot of great roles here. There's plenty of, awards, there's plenty of acclaim, but I can't think of anybody else like that.
I think Will Smith almost being in the Matrix or turning down the Matrix through Wild Wild West is also very well known. But Will Smith has a huge career outside of that, so it doesn't become
Well, yeah,
the
and also,
thing he's
like,
known for.
It's also like not an instance where like he was cast in the Matrix, shot some
Sure.
of the Matrix, and then they decided he wasn't right and went and got Keanu. Like that's I think what makes
Yeah.
it almost more notable is that like the story supposedly, for those of you who don't know, is that they wanted Michael J. Fox. The Family Ties, was that the show he was on? I think it was. Basically said no, he's shooting this television show, and we're not going to let him out of his contract. To do that, basically, we're not gonna like give him time off of this show to go film your little movie. And so they were like, all right, I guess we'll have to get somebody else. So they got Eric Stoltz, and shot footage with him for several weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks. And there's photos out there, and I think there's even some footage has finally like gotten out there just because of the fact that they shot. Like there's sequences of them in the parking lot where they're testing out the DeLorean. Like you can clearly tell that's where the footage is kind of from. I think even some 1955 stuff. But couple of weeks in, they just were like, it isn't working. They just didn't really like how his performance meshed with everybody else. They kind of thought he was playing it, I guess, maybe not quite as... There wasn't quite a comedy side to it like there was with Marty McFly, I get, or with Marty McFly, with Michael J. Fox, and it basically said it wasn't quite gelling. One of the funny holdovers of that, though, is part of the reason they cast, who's the guy that plays Biff? I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But the guy who plays Biff, part of the reason he's so giant is because he had to look like a bully to Eric Stoltz, who's significantly taller than Michael J. Fox is. Because Michael J. Fox is very short. So when they brought in Michael J. Fox, it actually ended up working out even better because
towers
the guy
over
who plays
him. Biff
ended up being just this monstrous human compared to Michael J. Fox. But yeah, so anyway, it's very, very odd. It's probably one of the only instances I can think of where something is like that, where they were literally cast, shot footage, and then they were like, no, this isn't working. We need to get somebody else. Now, in this case, the story is that Michael J. Fox was always the original intention, and they weren't quite able to make it work. But
just to put a button on it for anybody that maybe doesn't know the story, we all know they do eventually get Michael J. Fox, but they don't resolve the issue of him being on the sitcom.
He just does both.
He does both. He shoots the sitcom during the day, and then at nights and on weekends makes Back to the Future. They literally had a van that transported him from one set to the other with a bed in the back so he could sleep on the drive over. It's nuts what that dude went through and turned in like an iconic performance. Crazy stuff.
It's absolutely nuts. Anyway, back to Eric Stoltz. Obviously, a lot of interesting performances here. Like I said, I don't want to take too much away from the man. He's done great work. He was on a Battlestar Galactica prequel I liked called Caprica, where he was one of the main characters and has been all over television and film. Here, he's meant to be kind of the lead of this group. I see him more as the lead for like the first act of this movie than anybody else, but then Jon Voight's character kind of takes him out and kind of sidelines him for most of the rest of the movie. So what a deal for him. He gets to act for a few weeks and then just gets to lay in a bed for the rest of it.
And what I love about that little side plot is like, I forget he's in the movie. He gets sidelined. We know he's not dead. They're trying to get him to a hospital, but they don't check in on him regularly. You don't see him on screen. No. You forget he's there until he shows up in a pivotal scene in the climax, which, that's great. It's effective. You know, the movie makes a point to like write him off, and you actually forget he's there by the time he has to come back on the screen, which I think plays out really well. Andrew, Jonathan Hyde is in this movie as Warren Westridge. I don't remember exactly what his job is in the documentary, but he complains a lot.
The narrator.
Oh, that makes sense. He's got the accent, so of course he's. You think that narrator of a documentary needs to be there while they actually? It doesn't matter.
Well, they got him on camera, so he's like the presenter more than anything.
Okay,
like,
fair enough.
They're shooting him like with stuff in the background.
Fair enough.
I um I Jonathan Hyde is very interesting because like he's in my memory a lot because there's a lot of movies from the 90s I watched that he was in. Notably Jumanji, where he does the dual roles of young Robin Williams' father and then the big game hunter, which
Can I pause you right there?
Yeah.
Okay. I have not rewatched.
Don't tell me. Do not tell me you didn't know they were the same guy.
This is what I'm going to bring up. I have not rewatched Jumanji in a very long time, probably as an adult. Like, I can't remember last time I watched it. But I see, like, memes all the time where people are sharing stuff on Reddit. Like, did you know this is played by the same actor? Is that an instance of, like, yeah, no duh, that's really obvious as to what they're doing, and you're just trying to get internet likes by pointing it out? Or do you think it was a subtle thing to do to cast him in dual roles, Andrew? I have not watched the movie again.
I use it as like rule one that media literacy is dead.
Okay.
But it's generally, I don't think they're trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. Like, obviously, he looks very different because when he's his dad, he just looks like Jonathan Hyde. And when he's the big game hunter, they obviously give him the beard, they give him the hair, they give him the outfit. And I understand all of that, but at the same time, to me, like, the notion of what they're doing with that story, which, again, the story of Jumanji is not that deep. It is the opposite of deep, some would say. Because, like, the point is that part of Alan's problem as a child is that he will not vocalize what he feels to his dad because he fears reprisal. He won't stand up to his problems because he's afraid. And the big game hunter is meant to symbolize that exact same thing. It is the fear that he keeps running from versus standing up and facing his problems. And to me, that symbolism is about as subtle as a kick to the nuts. Like, it's not subtle at all. It's pretty straightforward. And so when I see people that are like, did you know this? And people are like, oh my God. I'm just like, do you not have eyes? Like, can you not see? Like, I just genuinely don't get it. But I genuinely don't understand it. I truly don't. But so when I see people post that, I think definitely a lot of it is just, hey, here's some quick internet points.
Sure.
But I'm guessing there are people who non-maliciously just didn't realize, because obviously I think a lot of people just haven't rewatched it. I feel like if you watch it now, it's pretty obvious. I think it's more that, like, you don't know what you don't know, I guess. Like, but the other thing that I vividly remember Jonathan Hyde from is The Mummy. He has the very iconic line, "You must not read from the book!" Like, he just, which is like a line me and one of my friends always, like, anytime I'm at like a half-price books, there's always like a stack of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, like, in one section of the store, like, of like some, because it's a public domain thing, so there's just a whole bunch of versions of it that are out there and they're cheap. But every time I see it, I'm just like, this is just sitting out in the open. It's not even locked. You could just open this and read it. This is so reckless. This is terrible. Anybody could just bring back Imhotep. This is the worst. And my friend always responds with, "You must not read from the book!" So I don't, because I don't want mummies running across the earth. That would be terrible.
I'm just imagining everyone in the bookstore, like, looking over at you guys, like, what's going on? You don't all know that reference, the Brendan Fraser?
The true fans would know the reference.
Speaking of incredibly sexy movies, my God.
Oh,
Mummy.
God. That movie, I think, is an awakening for everyone on the LGBTQ spectrum. I think there's an awakening for every single person in that movie, no matter what letter it is.
Yes, yeah, I agree. Owen Wilson is Gary Dixon. He's the sound guy, I believe, is his job.
There's someone I did forget was in the movie.
I remembered this one because, no, I don't think I realized in 1997 watching it, I probably didn't know who Owen Wilson was, but, you know, his career really takes off after this. And I do remember him being in this, much like The Haunting, where it was like he's just another actor at the time. And then him and Ben Stiller blow up and, you know, he gets his own career and stuff. But because one of the two scenes that are burned into my brain is, I guess I'll just say it now, he gets eaten by the snake, and there's a shot of the snake swimming underwater, and you see his body inside of the snake. You see his face pressed against the skin.
And everything. It's so
that's
so weird.
Always stuck in my brain. So I remembered he was in it. But He's just it's a specific trope. I don't know what to call it, but I don't know if it's comic relief, just horny, annoying guy. Like I don't know what this frat guy character is, but he's like something about the jungle that just makes me really horny. Is that the line he just throws out there? Like what? What was that?
Well, to
Why?
be fair, he's like clearly hanging out like with his girlfriend when he says this, but at the same time, it's like those two are clearly a thing. Like she's distraught when he dies, so like they are a couple. So it's not like when he's walking around just being horny with your girlfriend / wife / fiance / whatever. I mean, read the room maybe, but like it's at least a little bit more like, okay, I can't be too mad that two people that are dating are into each other, I guess. Like, good for you.
It's still a weird thing to say, but I guess it's better than him trying to use it as a pickup line on a stranger. Sure, Andrew. That's sure. Okay, sure.
I don't know their dynamic. I only get to know them briefly before they both get eaten by snake. The other one doesn't get eaten by a snake. She gets crushed by John Voight's muscular thighs. What a way to go.
Smell like old burritos. Speaking of his love interest, Denise, played by Carrie, woo her. A few years after this, she's in Eight-Legged Freaks, the movie that came up on our podcast recently.
Yep.
I'm seeing that she was in Sliders, a TV show that I very much enjoy. So in real time, I'm going to look up really quick who she plays. She is Maggie Beckett. Oh, she doesn't come on until season 3. She's one of the replacement actors, so that's why I don't remember her from that show. Also shows up in Sharknado 2, the second one. That's a fun title. So she's around. She does her thing. But in this movie, her main role is to be distraught. I mean, her boyfriend gets killed early on. She cries a lot. Tries to take out. What's his name? Peter? Steven? Nope.
Paul?
Paul. Thank you. Tries to take out Paul on her own, and as you said, meets her demise in his thighs.
Yeah.
Andrew, that covers our main players. We have a few other bit parts. Danny Trejo shows up in the beginning of the movie, but the one I really want to shout out here is the voice of the Anaconda. That's how it's credited.
You know who it is. You know who it is, folks.
The only man who could have a credit like that, voice of the Anaconda. It's Frank Welker, which...
Of course it is.
I see it in the credits, and for a while I just, hear like snake hissing, and it's like, I mean, okay. But they give this thing a lot of personality. There's growls and roars and sounds that I'm sure anacondas don't actually make, but Frank Welker just going to town. Alum of the show for everything. I mean, the guy's credits are absolutely absurd. We've talked about him plenty of times. Is he still doing his thing, Andrew? I've not looked at his credits in a while. What's his
mushroom? He is.
He did a pterodactyl in Scoob in 2020. He was the voice of Abu in the Cave of Wonders in the Aladdin remake. So yeah, still got credits out there. Still working. Still making his noises.
Because I feel like he does. I feel like he still does Fred Jones in a lot of stuff too.
Oh, it looks like Scooby Doo and Crypto 2. He's the voice of Scooby Doo and Fred Jones there. Yeah, that came out in 2023.
He's been Fred Jones. Like, I'm pretty sure I've established that he's been Fred Jones forever.
Yeah.
Like, he's the original Fred Jones from, like, 1969 and is still Fred Jones and somehow does not sound old when he does it. It's kind of surprising to me that, like, because, yeah, like, there's list of voice... Okay, here we go. The direct-to-video stuff. Yeah, if you go into here, yeah, he's got Scooby-Doo stuff that he's still been doing up until 2023. Yeah, he's been all over the place doing stuff, and it is... it's pretty cool. I love Scooby-Doo. I've made that very clear. I have machinations for a Scooby-Doo goalie helmet because I have a lot of ideas for goalie helmets, but this man is, when you take into account cameos and voice acting, he's the 4th highest grossing actor of all time.
Andrew, if you got Frank Welker's autograph, what would he sign? Something Scooby-Doo related or something obscure?
I've actually thought about meeting Frank Welker before. He still does conventions. Because Megatron is obviously the other easy layup for a lot of people because he was the original Megatron. But and he usually does appearances with Peter Cullen, so it's like the two of them together, which makes your brain be like, oh, well, I have to have him sign something from Transformers. But at the same time, yeah, for me, like Scooby-Doo is the thing. Like, I would love to meet Matthew Lillard and Frank Welker and have them both sign something Scooby-Doo, but it would have to be like a more recent Scooby-Doo thing.
Yeah, what would you do? Like, like a direct to DVD movie? Like, because you wouldn't want to do the live action stuff because that's not Frank Welker.
It isn't. There was a show that was out there for a while. I've probably talked about it before, but it was called Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. And it was an ongoing. It was a 2-season show they did in the 2010s. But it was one of the first Scooby-Doo stories or Scooby-Doo shows I remember that had a overarching plot over the course of all 2 seasons. So there's, the thing is told as like there being 52 chapters or 52 pieces. I loved that show a lot. But that one that had Frank Welker as Scooby-Doo and Fred Jones and Matthew Lillard as Shaggy. Had a bunch of other, kind of cool people I think that came in and did voice work cameos, including Mark Hamill. I feel like I would get a set of that and have them sign that. And then Matthew Lillard would also sign my Scream poster. And then Frank Welker would also sign a Transformers poster. So I would spend a lot of money.
I don't know what my answer would be. I'd probably have to pour over his filmography.
My friend definitely had him sign a Transformers thing when he met him. So
I'm not saying this would be my answer, but the Anaconda poster is pretty sick and ripe for autographs. That all black with just like the Anaconda eyes and a little bit of the snout. It looks really cool, and it was nice to get like a silver autograph on that. That would be kind of fun to do.
There is no Blu-ray of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. There are only DVDs. That is unfortunate.
Andrew, like I said, that covers our main players, and that means it's time to talk about the scenes of this film, specifically the best scene in the movie, or at least our personal favorite. So, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Anaconda?
It is when John Voight gets eaten.
It's so good. I'm glad you're picking this. I have a lot to say, but please go ahead.
He sucks.
Yeah.
He's real mean in this movie, and It is genuinely cathartic to watch him get eaten by that snake. He basically uses the whole bag is eventually revealed at this point. John Voight is using this group as bait to catch this giant anaconda because he thinks he can sell it for millions of dollars. He lures in Owen Wilson with this. He puts them all in danger, but the whole point that all he wants is that he wants to catch this anaconda. He gets very upset when he thinks they kill one, but then realizes there is another. That's a big kind of they really kind of blow right past that generally, that just, oh, sir, a second anaconda. But it is ultimately revealed that, there is another one. He takes our last 2 surviving characters, Ice Cube and Jennifer Lopez, ties them up, tries to use them as bait. It works. The snake comes in, but they fight back, and ultimately his intention of using them as bait goes wrong, and he ultimately is the one that gets eaten and eventually spit back up in a pretty gnarly scene. But and they make him look like, don't get me wrong, he's getting crushed by the snake's stomach, but they make him look kind of compressed. It's very unsettling and gross how they make him look.
Yes, whenever this snake first constricts around him and his face starts getting contorted, I don't know if that's like bones and organs making their way up into his face or his skull cracking or what, but he gets all puffy and stuff, that's gnarly enough. Mm-hmm. But yeah, when he gets regurgitated and he just looks awful, I assume that's still John Voight under much of makeup, but this is the scene that always stuck with me. He gets regurgitated, lands on his knees, and before he falls to the ground, he winks at Jennifer Lopez. And it's just such a cool little detail. I don't think the movie's really even trying to say anything oh, he's still alive or whatever, but it's just it just fits in his character somehow that he would somehow still at that point be able to wink one last little middle finger, I
One
guess.
last little bit.
Yeah. But I love that.
definitely-
I love that little moment.
I agree. It's a heck of a thing. It's wild to watch, but it is a gnarly scene. Ultimately, this gives way. Ultimately, it kind of goes tails. This is the climax of the film, and this ultimately dovetails into them essentially blowing this second Anaconda phrasing into the sky, and there's this really gnarly sequence where the snake's basically on fire, like slowly still trying to attack them, and it's this pretty gnarly looking practical effect that they use for some of this, and it is pretty wild to watch, and just cool looking, giant snake on fire. 10 out of 10, no notes.
I love the shot just before the snake swallows John Voight. There's a shot from inside its throat, like 3 feet inside the snake. You see this tube of snake throat before it eats him. So gross. Andrew, this movie throws a lot of Anaconda, quote unquote, facts out at you, so I couldn't help but read up on anacondas a bit. And I mean, everyone knows like snakes unhinge their jaw, blah blah blah. But I saw this picture of, I think it's from a museum. It was like a taxidermy animal, I guess, of an anaconda eating what are they called? Capybara? Like a almost like wild boar looking thing.
Yeah. Disgusting
how big this mouth is and how much it wraps around. It's so gross what these creatures can do. I love that final showdown, and you're right. It's so cathartic for this guy to finally be taken down because he's such a bastard. I like this pick for best scene. I'm gonna zero in on something else, a little more specific, a little shorter of a scene, more of a moment. So first, I want to talk about the look of the snake in the movie. We have a lot of animatronics. Especially like a lot of close shots, a lot of close-ups, a lot of still stuff. But even some of the wider stuff, like as it slithers across the boat or hits something with its tail, we got a tangible, physical animatronic snake. But for a lot of the kills, they go CG because that's the only way you could do it, other than a bunch of close-ups that kind of. It would be a mess otherwise. To get the kind of shots, kills they want, they got to go CG snake. Now, this is 1997. This is prime time for like this mix of practical and CG, but the CG looks like it's from 1997. I mean, some of it is woof. We just weren't there yet. But I like a lot of the decisions they make with these kills. So I'm for best scene, I'm gonna zero in on my favorite CG kill, and that is when the character of Warren, that's played by Jonathan Hyde, is trying to escape from the Anaconda. He ends up scaling a cliff face, hiding behind a waterfall. The snake finds him. It's on the other side of the waterfall, about to, strike at him, and he decides to jump for his life. He jumps off. As he's falling midair, the snake strikes, plucks him out of the air, and twirls him up to start constricting. It's gnarly. It's so cool. I mean, like I've already said what I said about the CG. It looks dated, but just the shot and moment is so cool that I really don't care. I mean, in 1997, I guess we didn't even know what bad CG was yet. Like, it just it's weird. I read reviews at the time. Like I read Roger Ebert's review, and I'll get to that in a minute. They don't really acknowledge it. It's like, I guess we just didn't know. It's hard to go back to, but at the time, I guess it looked cutting edge enough. At any rate, I love the idea of this shot. I think they pulled it off. It's so fun. I like a lot of these CG kills, and I'll talk about some other ones, but this one was my favorite, so I wanted to shout it out here.
Yeah, I think this is a good pick. This is another one where like I do have memories of this scene where like he jumps through the like the image of the snake coming through the water at him, like that was just a really cool visual.
Yeah.
Using the animatronics to have that snake kind of come through the way it looks at him. And then, like you said, him taking like the swan dive out only to ultimately just be eaten anyway. Just kind of, dare I say, showing the futility of fighting back against, the the metaphor in this case of what I assume is capitalism that is a giant snake. I'm kidding, folks. But
It's not their dad. It's not all of their dads.
it's not, where'd you get these pictures of my mom making fun of me? But it's no, please, no disrespect to my mother, please. I'm just kidding. But yeah, him jumping out and then the snake just going out after him and the way it like ties them all up and everything. Yeah, I can't imagine that's how that works, but it can't do it quite that efficiently or quickly. But ultimately, I don't care. It looks cool. So on the rule of cool alone, it definitely passes. But yeah, gnarly stuff.
And just while we're talking about these CG snake kills, there's a character, Mateo, that we didn't mention because he is the first one to die, played by Vincent Castellanos. But his CG kill is also very cool because the snake constricts around him. And again, we get that CG. I mean, this is my first wolf in my comments, #PP. The snake bites his head and then wraps around him and spins his body while the bite holds his head in place. So it snaps his neck. And again, like saying, I doubt this is something that happens in nature. I don't think snakes are this sophisticated in their kills where they hold the head in place and twist the body. But damn, it looks so cool and it's such a fun idea. And I feel like we never see the same kill twice. I feel like they come up with like 4 or 5 fun ways for an anaconda to off somebody, and I enjoy it every time.
Yeah, absolutely. They find ways to make it cool. It's like you said, the CG is a little dated. It definitely, doesn't, people would point at it now and be like, this is cheesy. And I haven't seen any of the sequels. This might be the best it gets. I don't know. But it is they definitely go to some interesting lengths to make these kills pretty brutal, pretty interesting. And yeah, I think the Mateo one is really good. I want to talk about the intro for a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So this movie opens with a kind of like, we're given this kind of point of view almost, but it's kind of a real, like, we're going to build the tension type scenario. We got Danny Trejo. This is his one scene in the movie. This is all he does. And this man is terrified. That's all that you are aware of in this moment, is he is terrified by something that is coming after him. And in this sequence, what I like is you never see the thing coming after him. But it does switch to like a point of view shot at one point. And I guess the implication is you are kind of seeing the anaconda's point of view. But I love when a scene builds that tension and you don't, the unknown terror. Obviously, we're watching a movie called Anaconda. We know what the terror is. But it is just, I think, pretty well done as far as having Danny Trejo sell that fear that he feels about this thing that's coming after him. And then ultimately the conclusion, which is that Danny Trejo would rather shoot himself in the head than be eaten by an anaconda, for lack of a better way to put it, because that's exactly what happens. But and again, it just sells that, for this guy, this is the preferable option. I would much rather face this than face that. And I think that's kind of, it's the not quite the Jaws method, a little bit of the intro to Jaws, playing in that same sandbox of the unknown terror, but you're not seeing it, but you know what it is. And there's several moments where they do like the point of view shot in this movie for the snake, and I think that's just an interesting thing to do. Like at the end in our climax, there's a sequence where like the camera is coming down towards Ice Cube and Jennifer Lopez when they're tied up, and you can tell like we're seeing the snake's point of view, and then it cuts around and you realize that we are, but I just think it's an interesting way to take this, given that they really do try to play up the intelligence of these things and how smart and basically, just cunning they are as far as being hunters. The perfect killers, I think, is what Jon Voight describes them as, or the perfect hunters. And so, yeah, just interesting choices around there to kind of provide that insight, make that interesting point of view, and then also just really sell that kind of unknown danger, which obviously Jaws is still going to be for a lot of people the kind of template for that sort of thing. And a lot of the stuff that it does, the point of view shots in the water, the point of view there, all that's, you could say it's the Jaws method. And so obviously it's never going to quite live up to that. But I think the movie does a good job selling the danger of this giant 20-foot snake, which turns out is just pretty terrifying on its own.
And not, well, let me choose the words carefully. This movie exaggerates anacondas for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But 17 feet is a realistic expectation for an anaconda. Now that would be a female, which are larger, and this is a 20-foot male. And then the female at the end is like, I don't know what it's supposed to be, 30 feet or whatever. So yeah, they're definitely bigger than they are in real life. Of course, it is Big Animal Month after all. But again, I did a little deep dive into anacondas. It's not inconceivable that there have been 20-foot plus because they're in such a remote part of the world that we're not exactly there studying them all in the natural habitat. And plus, animals used to be bigger, blah, 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 blah. So it's not a huge exaggeration. However, some of the characteristics, I'm sure they exaggerate. I mean, my very first note that I wrote, this movie opens with some opening text about anacondas and how big they are and that they're unique and that they will eat prey and regurgitate it just so they can kill again. Like, that's probably not true, but it does such a good job setting the stage for, how dangerous these things can be. I want to talk about Roger Ebert's review. First off, he loved the movie. 3.5 out of 4 stars. Damn near a perfect score. As one of his most notorious reviews for that reason. Again, this movie is not super well received, but Ebert not just gave it a passing score, but a glowing review. I talked about the effects a second ago and how they aren't really addressed in reviews at the time, so I do want to mention what he had to say. He wrote, several kinds of snakes are used in the movie, animated, animatronic, and for all I know, real. They are mostly convincing. There are a few moments when we know, if we bother to think about it, that special effects are being used, especially in a scene where a flaming snake attacks. But there are other moments that earn a gasp from the audience, including one where a giant snake captures its falling prey in midair. There's utterly convincing close-ups of an anaconda's head, its bright eyes glistening, its mouth gaping open to reveal fangs, its skin gleaming with a terrible beauty. That's what he has to say about the look of this movie. That if you're trying to look for it, you can tell it's a special effect, which that's not how the movie reads in 2025.
Right.
Obviously. I just find that fascinating. But he wraps up his review with this. Anaconda is an example of one of the hardest kinds of films to make well, a superior mass audience entertainment. It has the effects and the thrills, but it also has big laughs, quirky dialogue, and a gruesome imagination. You've got to like a film where a lustful couple sneaks out into the dangerous jungle at night, and suddenly the guy whispers, "Wait, did you hear that?" Silence. 3.5 out of 4 stars. The man had a soft spot for jungle adventure movies. I don't know what to tell you.
He knew what he liked. And you know what? We should all be so lucky.
Yeah. You know what? I gotta agree. The movie it's a fun time. It's almost exactly what I remembered and not at the same time. It's I don't know. I guess it's just everything you expect from a giant snake movie. I don't really know what more to say about it than that. But I do want to shout out one more thing here. Early in the movie, Eric Stoltz's character, we know later that's a sabotage, but he gets a wasp in his throat, and they have to perform. I never remember the right word. I said tracheotomy. That's not what it is. It's like what do you call that, Andrew?
I don't know. He pokes a pen through his throat.
Yes, a thing that I've seen in movies and TV shows countless times. Here we go. Cricothyrotomy. I desperately want to know if anything like this actually happens in real life. Okay, compared with a tracheotomy, cricothyrotomy is quicker and easier to perform. Does not. Okay, I'm not getting into this right now, but we've seen it in movies. A character can't breathe. They cut open the throat and they jab. I've seen a straw. In this case, they used a pin, a hollowed out pin, any kind of tube in their throat. They jam it in, then the character can breathe, and then they're, end up being fine. I definitely want to know if this MacGyver style, what's the word again? Cricothyrotomies have been performed in real life, and how often?
Thyrotomy. Thyrotomy.
I want to know the logistics of it, but I'm scared to Google it because I kind of don't want to see gruesome images of this.
The implication, the long and short of it, is that the implication is that your mouth is basically so swelled that you cannot breathe through it. So by puncturing your throat,
it's like a shortcut to the lungs.
Instead.
Yeah, I mean,
basically, your mouth doesn't work. Your upper throat is clogged, or in this case, the wasp stung his mouth, and his mouth swelled up, so he wasn't able to breathe through his mouth. So they had to poke a hole in his throat so that he could breathe through that.
I mean, I understand it's a legitimate procedure, but when it's in a movie, it's always with makeshift objects they find lying around, which, I don't think that's how an EMT is going to do it. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm curious about.
They're going to have actual tools.
Exactly, but I want to know if anybody has been in situations like this where they got to use what's around them and if they're able to pull it off successfully. Movies and TV shows that have me believe it happens.
The Wikipedia literally says it is nearly always performed as a last resort in cases where other means of tracheal intubation are impossible or impractical. And is associated with fewer complications.
Well, this might be my next.
And it's only meant
dive.
to be temporary.
Yeah, Eric Schultz lasts a long time with a pin in his neck.
He does not. They take that pen out by the time he's laying down in the bed. He doesn't have the pen in there the whole movie.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.
When he undertakers at the end to reappear and fight John Voight, he doesn't have a pen in his throat.
That's true.
There's a gag in one of my favorite TV shows called Happy Endings. I've probably mentioned it before. It's the six friends set up but it's in Chicago. Clearly
that's the twist. It's not New York. It's Chicago.
Not about massages. But no, it's one of those shows that's it's like Friends though. Like it's set in Chicago, but like they're clearly filming it on like a bunch of sets in Vancouver or something. But there's an episode where one of the characters, Damon Wayans Jr., who just super funny guy.
The character's name is Damon Wayans Jr.?
No, the actor is Damon Wayans Jr.
I know.
Ironically enough, there is an episode of the show where his dad is played by Damon Wayans. But there's an episode where he's trying to fix this failing business that he works at, and his wife comes to him and she's like, "Oh, I know. What's your favorite movie?" And he goes, "High School High." And she's like, "Okay, what's your second favorite movie?" And he goes, "Anaconda." And then it cuts and it says 12 minutes later, and she's like, "What is your 23rd favorite movie?" And he goes, "Sister Act 2, Back in the Habit." And she goes, "Yes." That was the answer she wanted, but she was expecting it way before. But he says Anaconda with such enthusiasm that it is forever associated with my memory of this movie now. Now I'm done.
Andrew, that concludes a big month for us, Andrew. Obviously, we talked about all of these large animals. I'm not going to do the theme again. My throat is really can't handle it anymore. But it's been fun. Yes, please, one last time.
Big Animal Month.
Beautiful. I'm gonna miss that. But in another way, I'm not. I'm not gonna miss it. But it was a good time. It's a big. We came back.
I don't want to have to do a cricothyrotomy on you. So.
Big month for we came back after our little break, our little refresh, and the response has been great. It's awesome to be back at it, and thanks everybody in the community, in the Discord. If you aren't there, there's a link in the show notes. Just like always, what are you waiting for? Come and join us. A lot of fun stuff happening, and we talk about upcoming episodes of this podcast, including the next theme. In March, the theme for our podcast will be, I don't know if we actually settled on a name, SNL-ish? Is that what we're going with? SNL alum? Sure. SNL adjacent? It's comedies starring SNL cast members that are not SNL movies. Obviously, we already did SNL month before. We covered the vast majority of official SNL movies. But, there's some of those movies that are by people from the cast, sometimes even still in the cast while they make this movie. It's not an SNL movie, but it has sort of that feel to it. So we are going to be diving into 3 films: Billy Madison, Tommy Boy, and Hot Rod. Andrew, confession, I've seen 2 out of those 3 movies.
What is the list again? Billy Madison,
Tommy Boy,
Hot Rod. I have also seen 2 of those movies.
Okay, well, it's got to be the same 2, right? Billy Madison and Tommy Boy.
Yes.
Is what you've seen, right? Yeah. I've never watched Hot Rod, but creatively, it's got a bunch of people I should love. I've started and stopped it before. I've heard a lot of great things. This podcast is going to be my excuse to finally jump in and watch that whole thing. It certainly has its fan base, so I'm excited to dive into it. I've heard Andy Samberg say in interviews, like, we made Hot Rod, we were trying to make our Billy Madison. That was like his North Star in their goal. So it'll be a fun full circle moment to end on that. But again, that's just 3 movies. And, there's typically 4 weeks in a month. And that is because Hot Rod is going to be episode 199 of this podcast, which means the week after that is episode 200, a huge milestone, and we love to go big. So that movie's going to exist outside of a theme. We are going to pick something that, well, Andrew, I guess we know what it is. We're just not ready to say what it is, but it's a big one. It's one of the movies that are inevitable with the podcast premise like ours. Would you say it's inevitable that we'd have to cover this movie eventually?
It's a planet-sized movie.
It is not The Last Airbender. Again, we're not covering that till episode 500. That is written in stone, not changing. But it is another infamous and much requested movie. That's going to be episode 200. And if you want to talk about these films, you can do so ahead of time. Again, hop into that Discord, join the community, hang out with us there. It's always a good time, and come back next week for a new theme, a new month. We're kicking it off with Billy Madison. And until then, just remember, maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony, and thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.
I remember my dad liking Ice Cube, and just me finding that very ironic. But
I'm gonna cut that, Andrew, because that's weird.
That's fine. It's ironic because he doesn't like rap.
Well, that's not clear.